The neon haze clung to the low ceiling like cigarette smoke, wrapping every corner of the bar in a half-light that promised both comfort and danger. Jack Rourke leaned against the counter, polishing a glass that had already been polished 3 times. He wasn't meticulous, he was patient. Patience was the only thing that kept a man alive in a place where insectoid traders bargained in pheromone clicks, crystalline mercenaries hummed like knives on glass, and reptilian warlords gnawed on bones the size of human femurs. The bar had no name that stayed the same from week to week. Aliens called it whatever word they had for neutral ground, and humans, on the rare occasions they stumbled this far into the galaxy's underbelly, just called it Jack's place. Jack himself wasn't much to look at, which was part of his charm. Scars lined his jaw like poorly carved runes, his eyes were steel gray, and his hands bore the calluses of a man who'd done his share of fighting before deciding he'd had enough. He never spoke of his past, but the way his shoulders squared at sudden sounds told everyone the military had once owned him. Now the bar did, and in turn the bar belonged to him. There was one rule carved into the countertop, burned deep, so even the most belligerent drunk could not miss it. Not during happy hour. Jack enforced it with a conviction that surprised even him sometimes. A brawl could ignite, plasma pistols could be drawn, and the air could choke on the smell of scorched ozone, but once those words left his mouth, the chaos froze. No alien ever tested it twice. On this particular evening, business was steady. A handful of insectoids argued over trade contracts, their antennae twitching violently. The crystalline mercenaries glittered like chandeliers in the dimness, quietly discussing jobs in a frequency most species couldn't hear. Even the reptilian warlord, broad-shouldered and sharp-toothed, drank his blood-red liquor in relative peace. Jack moved among them like a conductor, ensuring the orchestra of hostility never crescendoed. But beneath the chatter there was another sound. Whispers. The same rumor had drifted through the galaxy for months now, gathering mass like a storm cloud. They said a figure from the Forgotten Wars, a genius of strategy, a tyrant of design, had returned. His name was spoken as though it might summon him, the architect. Some claimed he had built fleets with his mind alone, charted wars like puzzles, and left entire systems burning in his pursuit of order. The council had cast him out long ago, stripped him of command, left him to vanish into myth. Yet myths, like drunks, had a way of staggering back to the bar when you least wanted them. Jack didn't listen much to rumors. He'd seen enough specters of war in the flesh to know most threats faded in the face of stubborn resistance. But when the door hissed open and the air seemed to drain from the room, even he straightened. The figure that stepped inside towered above every patron. A cloak draped his form, but underneath, metallic veins glowed faintly, like fault lines in stone. His face was partly hidden, the rest carved into cold symmetry. Conversations died mid-word. The crystalline mucks dimmed their glow, insectoids froze, and the warlord lowered his glass slowly, as though unwilling to clink against silence. The architect had returned. His eyes, if they could be called that, moved across the room, cataloging every face with the patience of a predator. When they reached Jack, they stopped. For a long moment, the bar seemed suspended, like a held breath. Then a voice rang out, low and resonant, carrying the weight of mechanical augmentation and unshakable certainty. "I have come to erase the aberration," he said, the words scraping against the silence. "I will begin here." Chairs scraped as patrons tried to retreat without drawing notice, but the doors sealed with a shimmer of alien code. Fear was thick, clinging heavier than the neon haze. The architect had chosen his battleground, and no one was permitted to leave. Jack set the glass down and poured himself a measure of whiskey. His hand was steady. He took a slow sip, savoring it, then let the glass rest on the bar. His gray eyes met the architect's glowing ones, and he spoke as though discussing weather. Not during happy hour. A nervous chuckle slipped from an insectoid trader before being swallowed by dread. The architect did not laugh. The glow of his veins pulsed brighter, like a warning. Yet Jack didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon, didn't break his calm. He had seen monsters dressed in flesh and metal before. This one, he told himself, would bleed like the rest. The architect took a step forward, and the bar's gravity shifted slightly, making glasses tremble on shelves. Patrons hunched low, afraid to breathe too loudly. Jack reached beneath the counter, not for a gun, but for another bottle. He poured a second drink and slid it across the bar, where it stopped just shy of the architect's reach. "How special," Jack said. "Strong enough to put a hole in you, if you're not careful." The silence deepened, weighted with anticipation. Somewhere at the edge of the room, a crystalline murk whispered in his frequency, "He dares." The architect did not take the drink. His gaze flicked to it, then back to Jack, and for the briefest instant something cracked in the perfect mask of his composure. Not hesitation, not fear, something stranger. Confusion. Jack smiled faintly, the kind of smile a man wore when facing down artillery. He tapped the rule burned into the wood with one finger. "Not during happy hour," he repeated, more softly this time. The architect's reply was a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Then we shall see how long your hour lasts." The weight of those words pressed against the walls, promising violence yet to come. Patrons exchanged terrified glances, trapped between one man's stubbornness and another's vengeance. Jack picked up his glass again, drained it, and set it down with finality. The first move had been made, not in fire or fury, but in silence and defiance. The game was underway, and the bar held its breath. The architect's gaze swept the bar like a blade across skin, and the air thickened with the pressure of an unspoken challenge. His next gesture was effortless. He raised one hand, and the room obeyed. Gravity convulsed. Liquor bottles rose from their shelves and shattered midair, raining amber droplets that never reached the floor before vaporizing into mist. Patrons clutched tables as their bodies lifted from their seats, eyes wide in terror. The architect did not shout or sneer. He simply demonstrated. Power, to him, was not theater, it was inevitability. Jack remained grounded, his boots planted with stubborn defiance, as though his weight alone anchored him against the distortion. He didn't flinch when the bar stools spun like broken satellites around him. He merely lit a cigarette, shielding the flame with a steady hand. Smoke curled upward, and for a moment it seemed even the smoke feared to rise too high under the architect's will. "This place will be the first stone," the architect declared, his voice reverberating like a cathedral collapsing in slow motion. "From your ruin, I will rebuild a galaxy without anomalies. Humanity will be unmade." The reptilian warlord snarled from the corner, his pride scraping against his fear. "Leave me out of this, machine. I came for drink, not annihilation." The architect turned his head, and the warlord's boast curdled into silence. A table snapped in half without being touched, wood splintering as if in obedience. None dared speak again. Jack exhaled smoke through his nose and reached for the bottle nearest to him, pouring himself another drink with deliberate calm. "You've got a lot of ambition for a guest," he said. "But house rules don't bend, no matter who walks through the door." A crystalline murk hissed, his facets trembling. "You mock him. He will kill us all." Jack flicked ash into a tray, unfazed. Maybe. Or maybe he just needed someone to tell him no for once. The architect's glowing veins pulsed brighter. "You cannot comprehend the order I bring." Jack leaned forward, elbows on the bar, eyes steady as stone. "Funny thing about order. It breaks as soon as someone refuses to follow it." The silence that followed was a silence of coiled steel. Then, with the inevitability of a hammer falling, the architect released his grip on restraint. Drones burst from beneath his cloak, sleek constructs of metal and light, spinning blades and humming plasma emitters. They swarmed, sharp as hornets, scattering across the bar in a storm of mechanical fury. Panic erupted. The insectoid traders shrieked in high-pitched frequencies, scuttling under tables. The crystalline mercenaries snapped into defensive stances, their bodies refracting light like jagged prisms. The reptilian warlord bared his teeth, torn between fight and flight. None of them trusted the others enough to form a line. The architect had caged them all together like prey. Jack ducked behind the counter as a drone seared a plasma bolt through the air where his head had been. The wood blackened, hissed, and cracked, but Jack moved quickly, slamming a switch hidden under the counter. Panels in the ceiling popped open, discharging a wave of static that rippled through the bar. Several drones faltered, their lights stuttering. Jack grabbed a stool and hurled it like a spear, crushing one into sparks. The patrons realized survival meant movement. The reptilian warlord tore a drone apart with his claws, roaring as plasma singed his scales. A crystalline merc swung his arm like a blade, severing two machines before a third embedded a blade into his chest, the wound glowing as he staggered. The insectoids clung to the walls, firing weak bioelectric discharges that disrupted drone sensors for precious seconds. Jack emerged again, wielding a broken bottle in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other, prizes from patrons who had once failed to pay their tabs. He shot two drones in rapid succession, then used the bottle to slash a third as it came too close. Each movement was efficient, not wild, born of years and battles he never volunteered for. The architect stood motionless, watching. To him, this was not combat. It was proof. He had created a demonstration of inevitability, a stage where his drones wrote his gospel in blood and metal. Yet his gaze narrowed when Jack ducked, rolled, and struck back with improvised weapons, moving with an unpredictable rhythm. The architect's calculations faltered in small ways. Humanity's refusal to conform gnawed at the edges of his perfection. Jack vaulted over the counter, grabbing a keg with both hands. He hurled it at a cluster of drones. The impact ruptured it, spraying liquor that ignited as a plasma shot struck. Fire rolled across the floor, consuming 3 drones in a burst of heat. Jack coughed in the smoke, but he grinned through soot and sweat. "How special," he muttered. One by one, the surviving drones fell. A merc's blade struck true, a warlord's fist smashed metal. Jack's pistol spat light until it clicked empty. Silence crept back, broken only by the hiss of flames licking spilled liquor. The architect raised a hand, and the last of the smoke coiled inward, drawn toward him as if the room itself obeyed. His expression did not change, but something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. "Impressive," he said at last. "Chaos given form. You resist inevitability with noise." Jack reloaded the pistol with a scavenged cartridge, his breath coming harder now. Bruises darkened under his shirt, his knuckles bled, but his stance never bent. "Noise is hard to predict," he said, "especially when you're trying too hard to listen." The architect stepped forward. "Enough spectacle. Words and broken bottles cannot alter truth. One duel. Flesh to flesh, mind to mind. If you win, I vanish. If you lose, humanity is erased from history." The reptilian warlord spat blood onto the floor. "He will kill you, human. He is perfection." Jack smirked through the haze, lifting the half-shattered bottle in salute. "Then I'll have to be something worse than perfection." He set the bottle down, eyes locked on the architect. "But we're finishing the drinks first." The architect tilted his head, a gesture as alien as it was calculating. He said nothing. The challenge hung in the smoky air, heavy as fate. Jack raised his glass, drained it, and let it slam against the counter with a sharp crack. "Deal." The room shifted, every patron sensing the world had narrowed to a single thread, one man's stubborn defiance against a figure who claimed to embody inevitability. And though fear clung to them, a flicker of something else sparked in their gazes, hope, fragile as smoke, that chaos might win the night. "You said." The walls of the bar shivered, as though the building itself recognized the magnitude of what was about to unfold. The architect extended his hand, and the room obeyed. Floorboards shifted, tables twisted, and the neon lights bent into impossible geometries until the bar no longer resembled a haven of drink and smoke, but a labyrinth of hostile architecture. Patrons found themselves frozen in place by invisible currents, their bodies pressed against the walls like moths pinned to display cases. Only Jack and the architect remained free to move, locked in a space carved for duel and spectacle. Jack rolled his shoulders, ignoring the bruises blooming across his ribs. He had fought men, beasts, machines, and nightmares in his time, but never all in one body. The architect's presence carried the precision of a machine and the menace of a predator. He moved with an economy that mocked human effort, no wasted gestures, no hesitation. Jack lit another cigarette, drawing the smoke deep before letting it curl from his lips in deliberate defiance. "Looks like you've redecorated," he muttered. "Ugly taste." The architect lunged without warning. His strike was not clumsy violence, but a perfect solution to the problem of Jack's existence. Metal fingers sliced through the air, designed to shatter bone and stop hearts. Jack barely twisted aside, the blow grazing his shoulder and sending fire down his arm. He retaliated with a hook that connected against the architect's jaw. The impact rang against alloy and stone, jarring his knuckles, but it forced the giant's head to snap sideways. "You fight without rhythm," the architect observed, voice cool and mechanical. "A flailing creature chasing instinct." Jack spat blood onto the warped floor. "Funny. Instincts kept me alive longer than logic ever did." The fight grew brutal. The architect moved with flawless precision, predicting Jack's movements with uncanny accuracy. Every jab Jack threw was countered, every dodge anticipated. Twice Jack found himself slammed into walls that shifted to catch him, the bar itself betraying him at the architect's command. He groaned but rose each time, muttering curses under his breath. The architect watched with clinical patience, recording every movement, every failure, as if dissecting him mid-battle. Jack's salvation was unpredictability. He fought like a storm, erratic, violent, and without clear intent. He faked stumbles that became sudden strikes, feigned exhaustion only to hurl himself forward with explosive force. He grabbed a loose plank from the distorted floor and swung it like a bat, splintering it against the architect's ribs. When the enemy raised an arm to retaliate, Jack jammed the burning stub of a cigarette into one of the glowing veins. Sparks hissed, and the architect recoiled, if only for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was enough. Jack dove low, tackling the larger figure into a crooked table that folded beneath their weight. The architect's strength was overwhelming, but Jack fought with the stubborn rage of a man who refused to concede even in the jaws of inevitability. His fists hammered alloy until his knuckles shredded, his boots drove into metallic shins, every strike fueled not by strategy, but sheer refusal. The architect flung him off with a burst of kinetic energy. Jack hit the ground hard, the air punched from his lungs. He lay gasping, his vision doubled. The architect rose, unmarked but no longer pristine. A dent marred his jaw, faint smoke trickled from a glowing seam. His voice came slower now, edged with irritation. "You should not persist. My calculations promised your collapse 3 minutes ago." Jack rolled to his knees, coughing, and pushed himself upright with trembling arms. "Then maybe your math teacher lied to you." The architect's composure cracked. For the first time, his attack carried something more than cold inevitability. It carried anger. He surged forward, strikes landing with thunderous force. Jack blocked some, endured others, his body screaming under each impact. Ribs cracked, skin split, but his grin remained, blood staining his teeth. "You hit like a bad hangover," he rasped, refusing to surrender the last weapon he owned, his voice. Patrons who had once pressed against the walls now leaned forward in awe. They had seen warlords fall, mercenaries bleed, machines malfunction, but never a creature so fragile as a human endure beyond reason. The crystalline murk whispered to no one. He does not fight to win. He fights to deny defeat. Cornered, chest heaving, Jack reached behind the warped counter, his fingers brushing against an old panel hidden there. A failsafe, primitive by galactic standards, enough explosives wired into the foundation to collapse the bar in one instant. His thumb hovered over the trigger. He did not press it. Instead, he raised his hand so the architect could see. "You think you've got me cornered," Jack said, his voice hoarse but steady. "But I've been holding the ace since you walked in." The architect stilled. His gaze locked on Jack's hand, analyzing probabilities. Detonation would kill them both, annihilate the patrons, erase the stage he had chosen for triumph. Yet Jack's expression betrayed nothing but stubborn certainty. "You won't do it," the architect said at last. "Self-annihilation defies reason." Jack's grin widened. "Reason's overrated." For the first time, hesitation flickered across the architect's perfect mask. His algorithms could not compute a man willing to gamble everything on chaos. His movements slowed, the flawless rhythm disrupted by doubt. Jack straightened, bloodied but unbroken, lowering his thumb without releasing the trigger. "You built your empire on logic. But me? I built this bar on stubbornness, bad jokes, and cheap whiskey. And right now, that's enough to beat you." The architect's silence roared louder than his words. He stepped back just once, and the warped geometry of the bar stilled around him. Patrons gasped, realizing what they saw. Inevitability interrupted. Jack wiped blood from his lip, raised the empty bottle still clutched in his other hand, and let it drop with a clatter. "Round's over," he said. The architect's voice came quiet, each word edged with something colder than rage. "This is not defeat. It is delay." Jack slumped against the counter, exhausted but defiant. "Call it whatever you want. But tonight, you lost happy hour." The patrons dared to breathe again, though none moved. The air was heavy with the sense that something had shifted. Jack had not won by force. He had won by breaking the very foundation of the architect's creed. Yet even as silence reclaimed the bar, the architect's promise lingered, a shadow of battles yet to come. "You said." The architect stood motionless, a monolith of alloy and fury, while the remnants of his power flickered in the broken air. His eyes glowed faintly, but the certainty behind them had fractured. He had not been destroyed, not even truly defeated, yet his perfection had been marred by a single human's refusal to bend. That was a scar logic could not erase. Without another word, he dissolved into shadow and light, his figure unraveling until only the faint echo of his vow remained. "This is not defeat. It is delay." Then he was gone. For a long moment, the bar was a tomb. Patrons who had been pinned against the walls remained frozen, as if waiting for the room to betray them once more. The warped floor creaked, bottles rattled, and the smell of scorched metal clung to every surface. Slowly, breath returned to lungs, and with it came sound. A nervous cough, the clink of glass sliding free of trembling claws, the hum of crystalline bodies regaining their balance. Jack leaned against the counter, every muscle screaming in protest. His shirt was torn, ribs fractured, his knuckles bloodied raw, but his hand was steady as he reached for a bottle that had survived the chaos. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching what little neon light remained, and swallowed it down in one long pull. When he set the glass aside, his voice carried across the room, calm as always. Back to business. The reptilian warlord, who only hours earlier would have gutted a man for brushing against him, approached with surprising caution. He held out a heavy claw, then set it on the counter with a dull thunk. "You faced him and stood," he growled. "A feat no warlord has managed. I buy the next round." Jack smirked, pouring the reptilian a drink. "House discount for survivors." The crystalline merc limped forward, his facets cracked from the fight. He bowed his head, refracting what little light remained into a faint halo around Jack. "Your chaos carried weight. For that, you have my respect." The insectoid traders clambered down from their hiding place, antennae twitching nervously. One raised a trembling glass. "To humanity," he chirped. "Chaos incarnate." A ripple of laughter followed, weak but real. Glasses lifted, claws and crystal and chitin uniting in a toast none would have thought possible an hour before. Jack raised his own glass, though his eyes remained fixed on the door where the architect had vanished. "To surviving happy hour," he said. The toast rang hollow and honest at once. The bar began to breathe again. Patrons moved cautiously, reassembling themselves from fear into fragments of their old selves. The mess of shattered glass and scorched wood was ignored for the moment. More important was the unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted tonight. A human alone had faced inevitability and refused to yield. That refusal had bought them all a measure of hope, though none would say it aloud. Jack limped toward the far wall, where a burn mark stretched across the grain. He picked up a knife and carved into the wood with slow, steady strokes. When he stepped back, the words stood plain: no wars, no revenge, no interruptions, especially not during happy hour. He set the knife down, dusted the splinters from his hands, and poured himself another drink. The reptilian warlord read the words aloud, then rumbled a laugh. A law fit for the galaxy. Jack shook his head. Not a law, just a reminder. He downed his drink, his body aching for rest, but his mind too restless to surrender. The architect's voice lingered in his memory like a toxin. This is not defeat. It is delay. Jack knew it was true. The architect would return, stronger, more determined, more dangerous. And when he did, the galaxy would look again to the man who ran a bar and kept chaos at bay with nothing more than grit and a well-timed joke. The patrons began to filter out, one by one, whispering among themselves. Tales grew in the telling: how Jack had fought the architect with nothing but a bottle, how he had bent inevitability with words, how he had turned a bar into the stage for defiance itself. By the time the last of them left, Jack knew the legend had already begun to spread. Myths, like drunks, never stayed quiet for long. When the door finally hissed shut and the silence was as alone, Jack slumped into a chair behind the counter. His body sagged, exhaustion pressing down like lead, but his eyes burned with a stubborn light. He poured one last drink and raised it in a solitary toast. "To you, architect," he whispered. "See you next round." The glass clinked softly against the wood, and the neon glow cast long shadows across the ruined bar. Outside, the city pulsed with alien life, oblivious to the quiet victory within. Somewhere out there, in the cold expanse between stars, the architect nursed his wounded pride and sharpened his resolve. A storm was gathering, one that would not be delayed forever. Jack leaned back, cigarette dangling from his lips, and let the smoke drift upward. He was no hero, no soldier anymore. He was just a man who owned a bar and enforced a single rule. But sometimes one rule was enough to hold the line. Tonight, it had been enough to make the galaxy tremble. The night stretched on, and though fatigue pulled at him, Jack kept his eyes open, watching the door. He knew it would open again someday, and when it did, he intended to be here, glass in hand, ready to say the words that had carried him through every fight, every war, every night worth remembering. Not during happy hour,